Hi everyone, I'm Wendy Means, creator of the LeftPOC Project, which brings you the history of leftists of color, one swipe at a time. And this is the LeftPOC Project podcast. Before I get started today, I just want to remind everyone to please check out the project on Patreon, and that's patreon.com/LeftPOC, where you can find, of course, all of our podcast episodes, as well as additional goodies such as readings, information sort of about the behind the scenes of the podcast and the project, etc. Again, that's patreon.com/LeftPOC. And of course, you can always find us on social media. I'm going to get into that in a little bit. There's been a bit of a backlog on the social media front, but more on that in a moment. On with the show. So today's episode, or I guess the episode for right now, it's currently 6:52 a.m. My daughter is still asleep. I'm looking at her in the monitor. And she had a rough time going to bed last night, so we were up kind of working on that. She also hasn't been eating that much. Lots of drama there. But I just want to mention all of that because it relates somewhat to what I'm talking about today and now, I guess, which is just sort of, I want to give you all an update on what's been going on. I had initially intended to have a Podmas episode every single night in the lead up to Christmas. I was on track to do that, and then a lot of things started happening. First of all, I was dealing with major fatigue. I found myself falling asleep pretty much every night. Like the second I ate dinner, I would just pass out on the couch, and I've been still struggling with that sort of fatigue, and a few things that happened this past week sort of exacerbated that further. So, to give even further background, about 2 weeks ago, I mentioned even in some Podmas episodes that my daughter's school had shut down because of COVID exposure. There were 2 students who had come down with COVID, and so to avoid an outbreak, they closed the school, suggested everyone get tested, etc. We did that, and we kept our daughter home for, it was about a week and a half that they were closed because it was a week and then the weekend. So we kept her home. And then school was going to go back in session the following Thursday and Friday. So we were like, great. We sent her to school on Thursday and Friday. Then she got sick. She picked up some sort of virus from school. Not COVID, not RSV, not the flu. Thank God, none of those. But especially, thank God, not COVID. But nevertheless, it pretty much like messed her up for a week. She was super congested. We had to take her to the hospital because she couldn't breathe. She was having trouble breathing. They told us to just kind of keep doing what we were doing in terms of, steam and the humidifier and making sure that she drinks enough fluids and, all of that stuff, clearing her nose, etc. We were doing everything right. But then later that night, she progressively got worse. She was having a lot of trouble breathing to the point that I thought maybe she was having an asthma attack or something. And then as an asthmatic myself, I was really worried about that because it was around when I was her age, although I started around 18 months, she's currently 21 months, I started having like full-on asthma symptoms, and which developed into actual asthma. So anyway, we went to the hospital again, like it was the same day over the weekend. We were kept overnight in the ER, and they monitored her. They gave her a breathing treatment via like one of those mask nebulizer things. She was really excited about it because she got to wear a mask. She's been excited about masks lately. She learned the word for mask and like says it over and over and points it out when we have on masks and like takes our masks around the house and like tries to wear them and stuff. It's really cute. But she, at least having been born into this pandemic, that's all she knows, right? Like she knows that adults wear masks in public. And so she's excited about the prospect of wearing one. And so she got really excited about being able to have her little nebulizer mask, her breathing treatment mask at the hospital. She did well in terms of recovery. They had her over the course of the night on several different forms of breathing treatments and inhalers and things like that. And just kind of kept giving her breathing related support. She had an oxygen, little tubes up her nose, the whole nine. And then we were there for a few days. she was released. I had to miss the day of like proctoring the exams for students because, of course, some of you may know I've been commuting back and forth to New York for the class that I'm teaching. So it was just a really rough, it was like the final, everything is like all happening in 1 week. And, I was excited about the prospect of my daughter going back to school because she loves school. She loves hanging out with her friends and, learning from her teacher and things like that. She has thrived at school, which is amazing and I'm happy about, especially considering how much time she spent with us in isolation. So anyway, on Thursday, or no, it was Wednesday night. Sorry, Wednesday night, I was getting together her paperwork. This was like when she was discharged. And I was forwarding things, I believe, I can't remember if I forwarded it on Thursday or Friday, but I got together all the paperwork, like the proof of the COVID test negativity and like information about her hospitalization and stuff because her school requires that paperwork be forwarded to them, which I'm totally fine with and agree with. I think it should be done. Sent it to them, and then I just let them know, we're looking forward to having our daughter back in school on Monday. And so, and then we literally like about 30 minutes after I sent that email, I got a post from them on like the ProCare app and then via email as well, letting us know that the school would be shut down again because of 2 other people at the school. I'm not sure if it was students or faculty or both, testing positive for COVID. So I was like, oh my God. So because the holiday break is coming up and they were going to have a week off from school, of course, they decided to just go straight through past the new year. So now the school is shut down between now and, or like between, I guess, the day that they sent that, which was Friday, between then and January 3rd. And it's a long time. We're going to, do our best. We weren't prepared for that necessarily, at least, and thankfully I'm not teaching anymore outside of home or anything like that. I don't have to travel anywhere. I just need to grade papers and like do some stuff on my own here and grade finals and things like that. But in general, it has been a bit of a whirlwind because I was not prepared for it. But again, I'm so thankful that I will be home for the entirety of the Christmas break. We're not traveling anywhere. And then I plan to be home the entirety of next semester. So that brings me to why I'm recording this. I mean, the issue is just simply that last week I did not have the time or the mental and physical capacity to record anything of substance and certainly really anything at all. I had too much going on. Obviously, my child is my first priority. My own health is also a priority, although it comes somewhat second to her needs, of course. But on the grand scheme of like order of priority, and I love you guys, but recording a podcast episode is going to be low on that list if considering everything that was going on. But she is home now. We are pretty much, we're just kind of settling into having her here every day with us again and trying to work out scheduling and stuff. And so while I will be even more fatigued now because I'll be doing childcare all day long on top of my academic work and my school stuff and whatnot, my teaching work, I will do my best to record the next few episodes for Podmas, even if they're short. We do have an interview coming up today. So today's Sunday. We're going to be interviewing some folks today and have that out later. I also have a few more reading revolutions up my sleeve that I will be posting, including one regarding Bell Hooks, who unfortunately passed away a few days ago. And I will be, of course, having some episodes with Richard as well. So there will be a little bit more going on in the Podmas universe besides just my own voice. And I just want to say, I really appreciate everyone's grace and patience and understanding as these things happen. Life happens, and especially in a pandemic, there's so many unexpected variables that come along with the process. So I really appreciate everyone just kind of hanging in there and being patient with me. And I will do extra episodes if needed to kind of make up for what I missed. But I think overall, that many of y'all have been really supportive and reached out. Those of you who follow me on my personal account have reached out and, said they hope everything's okay with my daughter, etc. So I really, 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 really appreciate that. The other thing I just wanted to mention, kind of going off what I talked about earlier with the school closures and whatnot. I mean, I don't know about y'all, but Omicron has me in my feelings again, right? And it's difficult because I think, many of us, although I know I'm not the only one, had kind of felt like we'd turned a corner again, right? I mean, we had, of course, the Delta surges. We still have more than 1,000 people dying a day in this country, which is absurd. Like it's horrible. But there were certain aspects of everyday life that started to feel like they were kind of getting back to normal. I mean, we were able to mask and go places and do things in a way that sort of felt like, okay, like I have to wear a mask everywhere, but I can do that and still kind of get on with my life. I was teaching, my students were in school in person. I was traveling to and from Maryland to New York. I was, communicating with friends who were in similar situations where they were back in the classroom, or they were back at work, or they were engaging in sort of somewhat normal activities like they had been doing before. At least those of us who had been working outside the home and things like that had missed. We had gone back to doing in some way or another, even if only partially. And now, it was like I blinked and all of a sudden everything started shutting down. This is in New York, but of course all of Europe is basically shuttered right now. There were it's almost like immediate, right? Like we had about 2 weeks notice. And I think that 2 weeks notice was much shorter in Europe because they had infections of Omicron pretty early on that they detected. We knew that it was here already and elsewhere before we even gotten notice of it from the South African scientists. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of things started closing right away and travel started shutting down and things like that. And I think that coupled with the fact that, I saw, for example, school closures. I'm not just talking about my daughter's school, which was like sort of a separate situation, but like public schools were shutting down in the area. Nearby counties were going to virtual. Universities, including NYU, which is where I am doing my PhD and where I was teaching, going to virtual. Like everything is switching back to what felt like what we kind of had gotten over in some ways, or had moved away from as things were starting to somewhat improve. People were getting boosters and, it sort of felt like we were on our way out. And I think even I tend to be very realistic about the pandemic and I'm kind of a worst case scenario kind of person on this because I'd rather be prepared for the worst and have things work out better. Even I was becoming somewhat optimistic about the prospect of what Omicron promised because while I knew that it was more infectious, I was seeing news from South Africa saying that it was milder, saying that, people weren't being hospitalized, and if they were for very short periods of time, people were incidentally being found out to have COVID, like they had gone into the hospital for other things, and then they had done a COVID test and found out, oh, you have COVID, surprise. But they didn't have any COVID symptoms. So in some ways, I got optimistic. Of course, that was tempered by the fact and the reminder that the majority of the people in South Africa who had gotten it were much younger, on the younger side at least, and were generally physically healthy, save a few patients who had, the high AIDS rate in South Africa still kind of changed things a bit. And some even believe that the initial patient within whom the Omicron variant emerged, or from whom the Omicron variant emerged, was him or herself someone with HIV or AIDS. And having that immunocompromised state, the body was not able to fight off the disease properly, and thus it continued to reproduce and sort of alter itself within their body, and then created this variant that spread. So that being said, I looked at it and I said, okay, well, South Africa has different sort of demographic makeups in terms of the youth and the general health of the population. People tend to be more physically fit, more exposed to sun, etc., in comparison to people, especially in the United States, where we have high levels of comorbidities, including obesity, other autoimmune issues, diabetes, asthma, environmental exposures that tend to be very detrimental to our health, etc. There's so many problems, our food being toxic, all of it. And so those sorts of things made me kind of think, well, if and when, Omicron comes to the US and kind of becomes more widespread as a variant, it's here in the US that's going to be the test, because in Europe, people also tend to be healthier. in Africa in general, but certainly in South Africa, people tend to be a bit healthier on that front. They don't have quite the same degree of comorbidities. And so I just thought to myself, okay, well, we'll see what happens, right? And then news started coming out from scientists who were working on the disease or the variant of the virus, in the UK, saying that there was not necessarily any reason to believe that the variant was milder. Of course, they're still working on that, but it was sort of the everyone wait and see situation, because a few weeks ago we only had information about the variant itself coming out, but we didn't, and its spread, its degree of spread, and some of the changes along the spike protein and all of that, which help it affix itself, to our body, basically to our cells and things like that to spread. But we didn't have enough information. We were just kind of waiting. And so now, as I said, there's more information coming out saying that it's a bit more dangerous, or may not be as mild, I should say, as people thought. And sorry, that's the monitor going off. My apologies. So keeping that in mind, everyone is sort of starting to shut down again. Things are starting to close up. People are starting to go back to Zoom everything. People who had been starting to leave home to go to the office or to do their jobs are now going to have to stay at home again. So it's just, I guess it's right on time for the holiday. For people who don't have to work through the holidays, it's a bit convenient because you can at least, this idea of like sheltering in place or whatever, you're already going to be at home, so it doesn't really feel like it's going to be that much of a change. But I know for people who were planning on traveling and things like that, they may want to take a second look at their plans. And I don't think there will be that much of a difference in travel, but I think that's what also scares me, because I know that Americans will travel and will not be taking the proper precautions, and thus the spread will be worse, and right at a time when, everyone's in everyone's faces for the holidays. And so I'm really concerned about where things are going, and I think it's sent me back into this sort of depressive state of, wondering what's going to come around the corner, and just feeling like things keep getting worse. And I'm a human being. And while I try to be really optimistic and I try to be, somewhat hopeful about things, I'm also realistic, and I have to confront the reality of things. And I tend to do so often. You all know from listening to this podcast. And so I've been preparing myself, even if it's just been a few days, on potentially homeschooling my child next semester. I don't know what that's going to look like, but even if it's not formally done, it's something that I'm going to have to do if her school continues to shut down, and if children at the school continue to have COVID exposure. And on the one hand, part of me is like, I wish that parents or teachers or whatever were doing more to protect the children at home, for example, or to refrain from engaging in activities themselves that put, COVID on the table, if you will. But at the same time, I also recognize that, there's so many variables and factors, especially about this new variant, that make things even more insecure. And also just Delta being around still and like pretty much thriving. I mean, it's making people sick left and right, even those who are vaccinated, even those who are boosted, So I think for me, I'm just preparing myself. And I think the optimism that I do have left is regarding what I know I can do with my child, how I can support her in this moment, and the capacity I have to teach her and continue to raise her the best I know how, despite these really challenging circumstances. I think there's positivity there, and I think there's some optimism with regard to, being able to continue bonding with her and having time with her. But I'm also just, I'm very frustrated because I kept looking, again, this is me when I was feeling really optimistic. I was like, okay, like second semester, my daughter will be back in school. I'll get a chance to work on my dissertation. I'm not going to be as exhausted because I'll spend time with her in the afternoon when she comes home from school. And then I can spend, most of my day doing my work and focusing on things. And I would say to myself, okay, I'm not traveling to New York right now, or at least I won't be for the second semester. So I can actually like really, really focus. And now it looks like that may not be possible. So like I said, I'm preparing myself and trying to make sense of what the next few months may look like, and just kind of getting my ducks in a row in hopes of, not being caught off guard any more than I already have been. And I'm sure many other parents and families and even individuals who are like really tired of this I'm sure they've been doing the same in their own way, or ways, I should say, as all of this news continues to come out. And I'm just sending everybody a kind of virtual hug and empathy and understanding that, like, this is tough and this is a really challenging moment in our lives. And I think that we, at least, speaking for LeftPOC, me and Richard, but just speaking in general for people on the left who are truly on the left and like concerned about others and recognize that there needs to be more done to protect the population amid this pandemic. Just know that we will continue to do what we do. We will continue to fight for, people's lives, to be honest, to be respected and valued and supported through as many means as possible. And I hope that in some way, even though our podcast tends to be on the kind of negative side, or negative, maybe not, but realistic side of things, just know that we will do our best to continue to provide content that will hopefully inspire people, if they're not already engaged in some way in learning more about leftist histories, that this will inspire them to do so. And this podcast and this project as a whole will encourage people to learn more about things that they didn't know about, and get in touch with some of the movements and figures and ideologies that should undergird all of our senses of humanity and, understanding and support of others, whether governmental or not, through whatever means. And, we'll just keep doing what we're doing. There may be some modifications, like what I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, as needed, of course. But, just know that we will be there, and that we really, really, really appreciate your continued support of these efforts. And, whether it's monetary or just telling people about the podcast or putting out the information about the project, we really appreciate it, and hope that all of you will stay safe, continue to protect yourselves, your friends, your family, your colleagues, and just don't lose sight of others' humanity and the need to support that. So with that said, I'm going to close this out. There will be, as I said, more episodes coming soon. I'm going to be recording those today, tomorrow, etc. So just be on the lookout for that. And but I just wanted to update you all and let you all know what's going on and why I was MIA. So with that said, thanks so much and have a good one. Bye.